They targeted conservatives for tax-exempt status, but the bottom line is they use key words to go after conservatives. This is something you have to institute changes to make sure it doesn't happen again. There has to be accountability for the people who did it. And quite frankly, up until a few days ago, there's got to be accountability for people who were telling lies about it being done.
Good morning. Welcome to the News Hub. I'm Rolf Winkler. The Internal Revenue Service's scrutiny of conservative groups went beyond those with Tea Party or Patriot in their names, as the agency admitted Friday. Wall Street Journal's John McKinnon has reviewed an internal report and has exclusive new details. John, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. So, a great story on the tax beat. Tell you what. More has come out since Friday when the IRS acknowledged that groups were being targeted because of their names. What's new?
A lot of stuff came out over the weekend, and basically the big news was that it turns out the IRS was not just targeting groups based on whether they had Tea Party or Patriot in the name. They were really combing through applications looking for any indication of a political leaning or a political focus on the part of these groups. And they were picking out groups for extra scrutiny based on whether they were interested in taxes and spending and whether they were trying to improve the government or whether they were just critical of the government.
Okay, we have a list of some of the criteria that was being used. We want to show people, including Tea Party Patriots or 912 Project being in the name, public education via advocacy or lobbying. They targeted, as you mentioned, issues including government spending, debt, or taxes. And they also looked for statements that criticized how the country is run. Now, all of this lines up, they all line up as right-leaning groups, correct, John?
That's right, yeah, basically.
And, you know, the IRS says that these are low-level career civil servants. They're not political appointees, i.e. it's not the administration. But now plenty of folks are dubious of that explanation. What do you make of it?
I think there's a lot more to learn about that, and you know, there's more to learn from the investigation that's been going on. There's an entity called the Inspector General for Tax Administration, and they have been working on a report for months on this issue, and that is expected to be released sometime this week. And so we'll learn more from that. But definitely there are a lot of questions swirling around why this project came into being and why it persisted for a long time, even after IRS officials tried to straighten it out.
And John, you've reviewed some of the report, and one of the interesting things that you note in your story is that they've known since at least mid-2011 that conservative groups were being inappropriately targeted. And this is significant.
Right.
Talk about why that's significant.
Well, it's really significant because in early 2012, you had IRS officials telling Congress, both at hearings and in detailed correspondence, letters to the Hill, basically, that there was no targeting and that there was no problem, no story here. And now it turns out that some IRS officials in Washington, including an official who wrote some of those letters, actually knew quite well that there had been this targeting. So that set of facts is tough to explain.
Are those folks still at the IRS?
Yes, they are. Well, the commissioner has since retired. He came to the end of his term late last year, but the IRS official who wrote those letters is still in her position as the director of the exempt organizations. So
would her job, in your view, be at risk at this point?
I think that's a fair question, yeah.
Okay, and I want to just laying out some basics for people that I don't understand. So what are the rules for political groups to be treated as tax exempt?
You know, it's a murky area, but basically it goes like this. There's a tax exempt category called 501c4. These are typically referred to as social welfare organizations. They can include volunteer fire departments, but increasingly they've also included people who are really interested in a social or political sounding issue. So they can do lobbying, they can do issue advocacy, they can even do political campaign activity, but the political activity cannot constitute the majority of their effort, the majority of their work.
Okay,
that's the basic rule.
Last question, very briefly. So one thing that's interesting to note is a lot of these organizations were popping up around 2010, 2011. Does that have anything to do with why they might have been targeted? These were some of the new groups that were coming on the scene?
Yeah, certainly on Friday, the IRS was saying, we were confronted with this very large increase in the number of applications for 501c4 tax-exempt status. So one of the things we were doing was trying to centralize the review of the ones that appeared to have some political focus.
Okay. Okay, yeah, just happened to be one particular political focus. John McKinnon in Washington, thanks so much.
Right.